Something I've noticed time and time again is just the amount of Ben 10 aliens who have overlapping abilities. I used to be more against this, but now that I've delved into and talked about quite a lot of aliens with similar abilities, it's given me a newfound appreciation for just how differently two aliens can approach using similar abilities. The only time this feels a little bit on the nose for me is when those aliens, a few in particular, not only share similar abilities but also color palettes. Now, to be perfectly clear, I don't actually feel like any of the aliens I'm talking about are literal replacements, but more so aliens who fill the same roles as others and could be considered a replacement for lack of a better term. The two that come to mind in particular are fastrack with accelerate and astrodactyl with jet ray, both acting as functional replacements for the previous ones depending on the series. Fastrack with accelerate in Ultimate Alien and astrodactyl with jet ray in Omniverse. Let's focus in on astrodactyl and jet ray first and we'll talk about the others later. Now, to be very clear, astrodactyl was never meant to act as a replacement for jet ray in Omniverse. After being an absolute fan favourite alien, much more so than I realised in the Ultimate Alien Force era, jet ray ended up being put on reserve in Omniverse before eventually never getting a chance to appear in the series in general. There's rumours that this was an intentional decision by Derek J. White, who was pretty quick to debunk this, saying that astrodactyl isn't a direct replacement for jet ray, and that he would just rather incorporate aliens like Spitter, Squid Stricter, or other aliens rather than Chameleon, jet ray, or fastrack. I shouldn't believe those three just not being his favourite or being shown too much on screen. I can really see this with jet ray in particular, and the just sheer amount of times fastrack just appeared in the final season of Ultimate Alien, it is quite a lot all of a sudden for one transformation. Especially a new transformation that doesn't have an alternate form in a series called Ultimate Alien. Speaking of fastrack, getting back on track, him alongside Chameleon and jet ray all never appeared in Omniverse, though Derek did give them Omniverse designs years after Omniverse ended. It's pretty hard to deny the similarities between astrodactyl and jet ray, having very similar colour palettes, flight and green lasers. Though there's more to astrodactyl's abilities than just shooting energy beams and having lasers. Breaking down their abilities, astrodactyl's main gimmick is his ability to create and generate energy weapons, functionally a little bit like a more restrictive Green Lantern ring or something of that nature. And while he can fly, his flight feels very vastly different from jet ray's. While I'm not a power scaler by any means, and I generally avoid the topic out of fear of getting something entirely wrong, jet ray certainly feels much faster to me. It really feels like jet ray's main ability is flight with his other powers going around that, while his astrodactyl can fly, but that's not really his main ability, it's more of an added bonus, while his jet ray's secondary ability is more his neuroshock blasts. Just to wrap things up neatly and be coherent, they've got overlapping abilities and colour palettes, but manage to set themselves apart from just how differently they interact with their environments or opponents during fights. If we're talking about aliens with overlapping abilities generally, it seems to me like Echo Echo does everything Blitzwolfer can do, but better, at least as far as their sound-based abilities go. Blitzwolfer certainly feels like a better physical brawler than Echo Echo, but that sort of circles back to my point about overlapping abilities. The pattern I'm realising here with aliens with overlapping abilities is, one alien tends to be more adept with that specific ability, and the other one uses that ability in conjunction with their other abilities. For this example, Echo's sound is more prevalent in combination with his duplication ability. While Blitzwolfer certainly has sound-based abilities, Blitzwolfer is more akin to a Wild Mutt than an Echo Echo. Now I've got a controversial take for everyone, and it's an open-ended question, so please feel free to let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. Why do you need an alien like Heat Blast when you have access to a transformation like NRG? They've both got heat-based abilities, the key difference being one is fire-based while the other one is radiation-based. Either way, offensively they're quite similar, they both melt things, they can both fly, they shoot their form of an elemental blast. I suppose in the specific instance of putting out a fire, Heat Blast has that in the bag, but even then I feel like NRG could possibly feed off the fire. I could be entirely wrong here, but I swear the heat that fire produces is a form of radiation, though I'll happily be proven wrong. If I am right, in theory, NRG should be able to at least partially absorb flames. Let's say I am wrong though, and I most likely am. Other than putting out fires, I don't really see a practical reason to choose Heat Blast over NRG. In the suit, NRG is far more durable, and you can go in and out of that containment suit as you'd like. Flight also seems much easier and much more of an innate ability, rather than something you have to practice and work out like with Heat Blast. Though Heat Blast can fly, it's not as effortlessly as NRG seems to be. The other thing is, you can't really put out NRG, while Heat Blast is more susceptible to being extinguished. I've really focused on beating down Heat Blast. I really love that transformation. He's got such a fantastic design and his physiology ties in so nicely with his abilities. In all honesty, I do consider NRG one of my favourite aliens, but I feel like I'm being pretty reasonable here comparing the two. It's more a matter of what aliens can outright replace others. There's obviously the argument for Swampfire replacing Heat Blast, but he's more a combination of Heat Blast and Wildfire than an outright replacement for one or the other. Speaking of outright replacements for aliens, You've got Big Chill with Arctic Guana. Again, I'm not overly involved in power scaling, but Arctic Guana's Ice Breath feels more like a concentrated and focused freeze ray, while Big Chill feels like his is less potent. Though in conjunction with the intangibility and flight, it's a pretty easy choice here. Circling back to Echo Echo for a moment, his duplication kind of makes transformations like Ditto redundant. I adore Ditto, and I adore pretty much every transformation I've talked about here, but from a practical standpoint, if you're after an army of yourself, what advantages does Ditto have over Echo Echo? To me, it seems like none. I just love how much of a little guy he is, and his design is great, but from a practical perspective, Echo Echo is without a doubt the choice here. I've really been focusing on overlapping powers and who does it better, but let's get back on track with the aliens I mentioned earlier, who not only function similarly, but also share quite a few visual cues. Similar to Astrodactyl and Jet Ray, but predating that whole thing with one of the most controversial aliens in the series, with Fast Track and Accelerate. I've touched on them both briefly in the past, but I think they're worth bringing up and exploring in slightly more depth here. With how many different and unique aliens there are in the series, it's pretty understandable that you would have a few that share colour palettes, but I think what probably gets under people's skins is just how alike their power sets are as well. I think as far as issues with the introduction of Fast Track, having him being unlocked prior to his first appearance off-screen took some of the impact away. I've always personally been a really big fan of how the world keeps moving in between episodes, and we're sort of just jumping in and seeing snippets of time, rather than seeing every single individual moment for every character. Though I understand why this does take some of the oomph out of things, especially with the transformations being introduced. Now, if you're not overly familiar with Fast Track, friend of the channel Danboy Wonder did a really great video discussing him, so I'll leave a link to that video in the description where he goes over the transformation more in depth. Plenty of stuff I had no idea about too. But back to him here. Like Accelerate, he's a black and blue speedster alien. I think the problem here is just how iconic Accelerate is in Ben 10. It'd be a similar situation if we got another big red alien with 6 arms who had super strength. What I'm getting at here is that there's not quite enough to set them apart like with Astrodactyl and Jet Ray. As far as picking one over the other, apparently Fast Track is physically stronger than Accelerate, though I've heard multiple arguments from each side about who's faster between the two of them, but I generally feel like Accelerate seems more capable. Though again, I stay pretty clear from power scaling, I just want to be super clear about that. Now moving on to our last replacement alien for the video, Edel, who's not one I really thought of as a replacement for Upchuck, but after looking into the transformation more, I can really see it. Edel being Ultimate Alien Forces era's stand-in for Upchuck. This transformation sort of moves away from the visual comparison and is more just a major example of purely who can eat things better. I actually think they're really good examples of how different alien species can serve rather similar roles without feeling like an overlap too much. It feels like there's so many aliens in the Omnitrix that you're bound to have a few overlapping. It's interesting how they both fit similar roles but feel different enough from one another. From looking into it, Edel seems to be able to turn less into more, while Upchuck has to take a fair bit in to have much output. Edel seems like he can stuff his face with a handful of rocks and some dirt and start blowing up mountains. That and he's super physically tough, and Upchuck seems pretty reasonably feeble, unless he's currently eating a lot. Though if you're comparing them head to head, which I know I haven't done for the other aliens I've spoken about, I get the feeling Upchuck comes out on top. I just feel like he'd probably eat Edel and be done with it. I'm going to be using the term replacement alien with a little bit too much liberty here, but it tends to be the earlier user of whatever ability tends to be looked at more favourably by the community as a whole, whilst the replacement alien seems to get hated on for filling the exact same role, particularly if they don't do enough to distinguish themselves from the role they're filling in for. If you have any thoughts or feelings about what I've spoken about, please let me know. Thanks for watching.